Wow, Happy New Year. Edward, it's been a minute. And good day to our audience. Thank you for tuning in to Just Minding My Business, JMMB with. We appreciate you and looking forward to, you enjoying Edward today. So just so you know, our interviews are like heard all over the world, and we want you to think about going beyond the interview. So just give us a call contact us at jmmbradio@gmail.com, and we'll help you and show you how to do it. Edward, you want to introduce yourself to our guests and what you stand for?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on your show, Ida. I've been on before, and I appreciate our conversations in the past. And Happy New Year. We were just talking about how 2022 went by in a flash, and I'm sure 2023 is going to go by even quicker, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So again, my name's ed.beltran. I'm the CEO of Fierce Inc., which is based on Fierce Conversations, which is a best-selling book written by Susan Scott. It sold over 1 million copies. And really what the background of the book is about is helping people understand that conversations in their day-to-day and their business environment and personal lives are absolutely imperative. And it's super important that you have these. And we've been training these conversations with Fortune 500 companies down to emerging startups for the past 20 years. And we've also recently launched some innovation that I would love to tell you more about, Ida, as we get deeper into it. But at the crutch of it, this is what we do. There's so many interactions in your day-to-day that happen, and you as a person have a choice on how you engage that. So I'm sure many people can relate to someone says an offhanded comment to you that you don't really understand. You have a couple of choices. Do you walk away and just kind of harbor those feelings? Like, why did Ida say that to me, right? She didn't like my haircut, right? Or, and go and tell 3 other people like, oh, you know what Ida said, which amplifies toxicity in the workplace. Or do you come back to the individual and say, hey, Ida, I noticed you made this comment, about my hairdo. I'm being facetious, right? But there's a lot of different topics, in which case you go, oh no, Edward, I'm really sorry. Actually, I really like your haircut, but I was using it as an example in the situation. What we're finding in our research is that 90% of the time, they're misunderstandings, or people just aren't self-aware of the impact that they're having, and that wasn't their intent. But you would never know that unless you re-engage people. So that's a simple example of what we teach, but there's many different conversation techniques that help people in their day-to-day, such as delegation, such as when to confront, how to have an effective team meeting. I'm sure many of you have been in meetings before where you're just like, wow, like this 60 minutes was a waste of my time, right? And so instead of having a clear agenda, we have very clear formats that are, help become very effective and ensure everybody's voice is heard in the room. And there's a lot of inclusion as well. So that's our background. And again, I'd love to get into some of the innovation that we've been doing as we get deeper in our conversation. But thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Engagement is a critical piece of our lives. And, we have all different types of ways of communicating. We've got the text, we got the email, and then we've got upfront and personal, and I wanted to know, do you address all of these different ways of communicating?
Absolutely. And that's just a fantastic question, Ida. And one thing I want to share with you is really interesting. Prior to joining Fierce and myself being grounded in these techniques, I used to write long emails. I used to have a great dependency on writing emails to be able to convey my points. And what's interesting is just from being grounded in these techniques and how effective they are, I don't write long emails anymore. I find myself picking up the phone and having 2-3 minute conversations to be able to clearly connect and get my point across. And in retrospect, when I look back earlier in my career, I asked myself, was it that I didn't have the confidence? Was it that I felt I was too busy, right? And it's interesting because the effectiveness of picking up the phone on certain things that are critical is actually more efficient than sitting there and writing an email that's super long that you got to proofread, right? And it's still subject to a lot of misunderstandings and, hey, what did you mean by this, right? Where a 2 or 3 minute conversation, hey, Ida, here's a couple things that are outstanding. You're like, oh, got it, or I need this, and we're good.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to agree with you on that. If I, texting the same way, I get people that are sending me all of these paragraphs in a text, and I'm like, I'll text them back, call me, please.
Right.
So in the workplace, we all know, and we've all experienced different personalities that come along with the engagement. You've got some people that are, like straight to the point. And then you've got other people that always have sarcasm with everything that they say. So when you're working with a company, do you address these different things based on personality?
Yes, and that, again, that's a fantastic point. So, okay, so there's a lot of research out there. One of my favorite IO psychologists, her name's Tasha Urwich. She's written a lot within HBR, and there's one statistic that stands out so strong. And in her research, she says that 95% of people think they're self-aware, but 10 to 15% really are. So I'm going to say that again because it's such an impactful statement. 95% of people think they're self-aware, but 10 to 15% really are. Now, the reason why that's amazing is because if you take that as for what it is, then that means that when somebody's being sarcastic, somebody's being rude, someone's being belittling, statistically, they don't know the impact that they're having, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you ensure that they're self-aware in a way that's conducive? And these are the techniques that we teach. So what you do is you first provide feedback. Now, it's one thing to be able to say in theory, hey, Ida, make sure you give people feedback. But it's another thing to say the way you do it is you go in with a clear context, meaning maybe this person isn't self-aware, they're not trying to be rude, they're not racist if they made an off-color comment. Maybe they need this to be brought to their attention, but you do it in a way where you're stating observable behaviors versus generalization. So, for example, one of the things that I've heard many times in my career, I know you and I talked about this before, is I'm Mexican and I'm a little over 6'1", not quite 6'2". And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, wow, you're really tall. Are you sure you're Mexican? Or wow, right? And it's one of those things where instead of me saying, wow, you're really racist, which is a generalization, or wow, you're really rude or crass, which is another generalization, it's, hey, when you made this comment to me, I took it slightly offensive because the unconscious bias there is that Mexicans are short and or speak with accents, right? And now you're focusing on the observable behavior, in which case people say, oh, I'm really, really sorry. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Or in another context,
I'm so sorry. You never know when the phone's gonna ring.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll take your example where you're interfacing with somebody who is sarcastic or belittling, right? And if you take that same approach, you would talk with the person one-on-one and say, Joe, in our meeting, you made this comment and it came off as sarcastic. What was going on with you? In which case, Joe would say, thank you, Ida, for bringing that to my attention. It was not my intent at all. Like, thank you, right? As a gift. Or I came in the meeting, I had a bad conversation with my significant other employee. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. So what happens a lot of times that we find at it is that you provide people feedback, there's an understanding and acknowledgement, and it keeps showing up, right? Joe's still sarcastic, in which case what we have at the next level is the confront conversation. So a lot of times people want to go right to confront, right? Right. Like, Joe. Exactly. And what we're saying is it's an escalation. So when you get to confront, it's not saying, I told you this, we have this agreement. It's, Joe, we talked about this. You acknowledged, right, that you came off, your comments could be construed as sarcastic or belittling to me. And you agreed that it was something that you were going to look at, and it keeps showing up, right? Like, I really need this to, I really need this to go away, and in the confront conversation.
Oh my, this phone is ringing off. Let me turn my phone off. I am so sorry, Edward, but you know how that goes with life. Yes, and carry on.
Oh, sorry. And then, yeah, so the next level is, we talked about this and these behaviors are still showing up and they're having this impact on me or people around. And then the escalation is stating what is at stake, right? So what is at stake is our ability to work together, right? What is at stake is the comments that you're making, have come off as harassing and I need to escalate this. Like you're laying out clearly now that next level of escalation. And what we found in our research is most of the time at the feedback level, it goes away, it's misunderstanding, people become self-aware. In a smaller percentage, it has to go to confront. At that level, people realize like, oh, okay, they're shaking into the fact that this is a major issue. And then, some things do escalate.
Yes, and I like that you explain that really well, because we all work with people that can come off abusive. And I've worked with people like that, and it has been to an point. But when they're coming at you in that moment, do you find that sometimes you've got to kind of walk away and breathe?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. That's one of our chief behavioral science officer has extensive background in stress and resilience. And yes, there's a lot of techniques to be able to take, a deep breath, to be able to assume good intent. That's one of them as well, right? Like, oh, wow, he's really intense. Maybe he's not self-aware. Let me clear my context. I'll come back to him and provide that feedback later.
Yes, because I know when somebody comes at me, in order not to react and come from a place of responding, I've got to kind of walk away and collect myself. And it all depends on the tone. There's a lot of attributes that's involved. The tone has a big part of it, because then I feel like you're attacking me because of your tone.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question for you is, when you are working, why would companies come to you? What are some of the things because they have to have awareness as well. They have to be in tune with the culture of their company,
right,
in order to say, you know what, I need somebody to come in here and help out with how we are communicating with each other.
Absolutely. And I would love to talk about that, but the comment that you made before, I think is so important. I just want to elaborate on it just real quickly. So it's a whole study around emotional intelligence, right? And the science behind emotional intelligence is around being like self-aware, but then knowing how to like self-manage, right? So the example you gave is ones that we run into all the time. And again, I'm by no means an expert, but I do understand this because we teach this. But your limbic system is where your emotions run through first before it gets to your frontal cortex, and you logically can process what's happening, right? So the science stipulates you're going to have an emotion around something first, right? And then this comes down to that discipline around, if you know that, and you know that you have to give yourself time for your brain to get the message and logically think through this. And again, it's a discipline, it's a practice, but that's absolutely valid, Ida, to what you said, and it happens to all of us because that's the way we're wired. But knowing that is the key. I love the second question you asked around companies who come to us and around culture. Culture is a word that's used a lot. Now, what's interesting is when you ask people about culture, many talk about it like it's this thing. It's the company's culture, right? Culture is this magical cloud that sits on top of it. But what people don't realize though is you are the culture. Ida, you are the culture. I am the culture. And the reason why we're the culture is because how we interact in that culture dictates what the culture is. So as we opened up our conversation around feedback and enriching relationships in a way that helps us drive results, that's a culture. That's a culture of feedback. That's a culture of engagement. Where in a lot of cultures, what will happen is people aren't having those conversations. It's wow, Ida was rude, Ida was sarcastic, I'm going to go tell 3 other people, we're going to create these factions, Ida's going to have her faction here, right? And that's what happens in a lot of companies. That's the culture. People are not engaging, they're not having conversations, they're not breaking down silos, they're not looking to enrich relationships. It turns into a cutthroat, toxic culture, and it all happens from those day-to-day interactions.
Mhm.
And that's what
Absolutely.
we do as a company, is we come in and train and empower individuals. And through these interactions, they create the cultures that's desired.
Okay, so companies, a lot of times companies have years of this toxic behavior. When is it that they recognize that this is affecting productivity? It's affecting everything, sales, because if people aren't interacting together harmoniously, it's going to affect your bottom line. It's going to affect everything associated with your company. So when do CEOs recognize we have a problem?
Yeah.
We need help.
Yeah, great question. And I think it comes in 2 forms. One is, you touched upon it, when their results are not great, then people are going to sit back and say, what do we need to do? And you would hope that at the executive level, or people who are making decisions, they call out, we have an issue within our culture that we need to solve that's tied to results. That's what a progressive company would get to, or at least start exploring. The other one is, when results are consistently bad, they change leadership. So you would hope that the board, or who's hiring those next executives, would be leaders who've gone through this level of training and knowledge, and know the importance of your underlying culture to get to your results, right? So it's
Right.
twofold, right? It's, we replace the leader comes in more progressive, or you sit back and say our results aren't great. Why, right? It's a cultural issue. Let's get down to this training and make sure that our people are empowered with the skill sets that they need for daily interactions.
Absolutely. So if companies want to work with you, how do they connect with you?
Absolutely. You can go to our website, fierceinc.com. That's standard spelling, fierce, inc.com. You could connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm under Edward J. Beltran, again, with Fierce. And I'm happy to connect with everyone at any time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, new companies. Let's talk a little bit about new companies, because a lot of times
Mm.
you want to build the foundation right from the floor up. That way you don't have to go back and fix it.
Mm.
So how do you target like new companies coming up to bring their awareness up to, we want to make sure that your company starts out on the right foot. We believe that having this piece our company brings will support you in doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that, because the research shows, Reid Hoffman, through his book, states that, your first 15 employees are very critical hires, because they're basically going to cement your culture, which is harder to turn around once you have that foundation built, right? And so the advice is that your first 15 employees are absolutely critical. Now, it's hard though, because a lot of startups, when they first start up, they're just like scrambling for sales, scrambling for survival, right? I'm going to hire, I need to hire these people, especially if they get funding, they go on a hiring spree, right? But it's important that you step back and slow down and ensure that you are deliberate around your culture that you want to create, and those employees are aligned well with that. Because if you hire the wrong employees, or they look good on paper, and they don't have certain skill sets, or they come with toxicity or other baggage, and we all do, right?
Yeah.
It's going to cement your culture, and it's going to impact your results, and it's going to be harder to turn it around. So that's our advice. And so for a startup, or somebody, or a company that's early on, it's important that they have these skill sets, this acknowledgement, the stuff that we're talking about, so that they ensure when they're hiring someone, that person that they're hiring has a growth mindset, meaning I might not have been aware of this. This is something that I'm open to for growth, or already have that higher level EQ, emotional intelligence, right? Around the fact that how we interact is what dictates, or how we talk, what conversations we have dictates what gets done or doesn't get done.
Absolutely. And a lot of times as CEOs, like you said, we hustle and bustling, trying to, put all the pieces together. And sometimes in the beginning, it's just visions that we're trying to implement. And, one of the things I believe that as a CEO, it comes from you first, because if you set the stage from you first, then a lot of times when you are hiring, if this person doesn't come, you can kind of feel it in the interview. You kind of get that intuition, that gut feeling, so to speak, even though they might be glowing on paper. But when you're talking to them, certain little things come out that may not align with who you are as a person, as well as who you are as a CEO, because how we are as people is also going to drip down into our leadership as well. So when I'm really focusing on the new business. So when you're working with the CEO, do you guys go through, them as a person, what their vision is, what their, how do you want this to flow?
Yeah, we from our perspective, we typically come in and try to, ensure that the training and the orientation's in place, right? So to your point, the CEO has to be and set the example, right? So we have to ensure that the CEO understands and subscribes to this methodologies and these approaches versus, well, they need to do this, right? And then to your point, no, they need to be in a position to be able to set the example, right? And ensure that this reinforces the culture. So that's step number one, right? And it's interesting what you said, because I think a lot of times a hiring manager, new business or existing business, will look at a situation like, oh, we need somebody to do this, right? We're behind on this, right? The problem is that if you don't take the time to vet out the right hire, right, with these skill sets, it's going to be short-term in nature anyway, right? It's going to be somebody that might meet your need today. They're going to be gone 6 months, 8 months, and or worse, Ida, which is absolutely worse. They actually create ripples of toxicity, right, that impact more than just that bad hire. We've definitely seen that before in companies we've worked for, and that's especially imperative in startup environments where you want people to be creative, you want people to be motivated, they have to wear different hats, right? So
yeah. So give us a little snippet of the different things that you go through with the company. So I'm hiring you, this is our first engagement. So what would some of the things that you go through, the processes that you do with the company?
Yeah. First and foremost, it's getting an understanding of what's happening, right? Like, how are you organized, right? Who's the leadership? Who's going to be invited to the table? And what we have is we have something called ideal outcomes. So what would great look like? Like, what is it that you're trying to solve for when we leave? What does great look like, right? And then it goes back to what we were saying. We want people to be collaborative. As a CEO, I can't be in every single meeting. I want people to be enabled and creative, right? Don't we all, to be able to solve problems that don't involve me, and or people solve problems before they come to me, right? I'm just throwing stuff out, but a lot of times for a new company, that's true, right? That's what we hear. And it's like, okay, so this is the context that we want to ensure that is being discussed as we go through this training, right? So instead of them just being theoretical examples, like, oh, you got to give feedback, here's how you do it. Oh, you got to confront, here's how you do it. Oh, you got to delegate, here's how you do it. It's within the context of what you're trying to solve as a company.
Okay. And what kind of techniques do you use as you move through this training?
A couple of things. So one is, I would love to tell you about an innovation that we've created, which is getting tons of traction, right? So we talked about the typical L&D model where we'll go in and train for a couple hours, couple days, right? The content, and then we have some sustainability tools for people as they go into the real world and engage in these conversations. Like, what did I learn in this session, right? And we have apps to help them kind of look through their materials to have a confront conversation, or how do you delegate properly? You know, it's interesting what we found, Ida, is this, I'll tell you a story. So we created this app that our enterprise customers loved the way it looked, loved the step-by-step wizards of how to have like a front conversation, for example, or feedback. But when I looked at the engagement data, it was very low. It wasn't as high as I would have anticipated with something that got a lot of fanfare. And so I started doing interviews with end users from our enterprise customers and so on and so forth. And what I learned was this: when you're in that moment, like we just talked about, someone sarcastic or coming at you pretty heavy, you're in a heightened moment of stress or anxiety. So you're not thinking, let me reach into my pocket and get my phone and go through my app. Remember, we talked about it hits your limbic system first, emotions first, before it gets to your cortex.
Absolutely.
So what we've done, Ida, is this: we've actually backward integrated into wearable devices. So like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, because they're capturing continuous heart rate data. And what we're doing with that data is we're bringing in your calendar data, your GPS data, to be able to say your highest stress moments were when you were doing this, interfacing with this other employee, talking with your boss, with your significant other, and pulling out these trends. And the reason why that's important, Ida, is because a lot of folks will say, oh, I'm highly stressed, I live a stressful life, but they're not getting down to their key stressors. They don't know, right? Like we said, 95% of people think they're self-aware, the 10 to 15% really are, right? And so when people sit back and they say, oh, I just live a stressful life, they go to typical stress management techniques like better diet, exercise, meditation, all this stuff works, but it doesn't get down to what's actually causing the stress.
Right.
The things that are causing the stress. Yeah. The things that are causing the stress, when you solve those, actually drive the outcomes you desire personally and in your organization. So with the wearable technology, we're giving tremendous insights surgically into what's happening in people's day-to-day. And your body doesn't lie, Ida. Your body will tell you when something's wrong, right?
Absolutely.
And we're then giving you the tools to how to tackle it and solve it.
Wow. That's definitely scientific. Really paying attention to the body and how it's responding in that moment. That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Right. And more importantly, what do you do about it?
Right.
How do you tackle it?
Yes. But once you're aware, this is what's happening, then that when this happens, this is what I did. This is what my body goes through. This is, then you can fix it.
That's right. Exactly.
Yes. Then you can fix it. Wow.
So to answer your question, that's our typical model would be, we would go in and train populations, right, on our content for, like I said, hours or days on the time. But we've now started transitioning our model to where we're using the technology to help people do the same thing, but within the context of what it is that they're facing in their day-to-day. Because then it's more relevant, right? Here's what's happening. Let me become, this employee is just not listening, or, it seems like I'm not getting across to them. Well, there's tools to be able to have conversations to be able to solve for that, right? But it's being able to know that this is something that's impacting you, right? But then more importantly, what do you do about it?
Yes. Oh, wow. Okay. So what results are you having?
Oh, we're having just tremendous results. So within 2 weeks of either a one-on-one coaching session or through the AI bot that's actually in the app, we're seeing average stress drop 10 to 15%. And I want to tell you more about that. We're seeing other great results as well, like organizational commitment going up, burnout going down within 2 weeks of one 90-minute coaching session or intervention. So, excuse me. And we recently ran a big scale pilot with a major corporation where we saw 34% drops in stress within 2 weeks of one 90-minute coaching session. So the results are just phenomenal. We couldn't be happier.
Wow. So let me also ask, how long do you normally work with a company? What's the time frame? A year, 2 years? And is there some type of maintenance type? Because people, it's all working, but then when you're not there, people tend to slip.
Right. Yeah, definitely. For certain companies, we're with them for a few years, 3 years, 4 years. Other companies, they have us embedded in their onboarding programs. So a new
Okay.
employee comes in, we give them the right training, especially with Pulse. Pulse is our innovation, giving them 30, 60, 90-day coaching sessions, right, that tie back to what it is they're experiencing in their environment. For other companies, we go in, we train, we facilitate, and they have access to all our materials for the year, including sustainability, and that's sufficient, right? So it kind of varies, Ida, depending on the company, but our average lifetime value our average time with the customer right now is about 3 years.
Oh, okay. And who are your key players? Is it like HR? Because we all know the CEO, depending on the size of the company, the CEO is not going to constantly engage in this. So what departments do you target in order to keep this implementation in place or to get it implemented?
That's a great question and great point. Historically, it has definitely been within leadership and development, or HR, to your point. However, with our innovation, it's actually many times starting up in the C-suite. And the reason why is because you can't open up a newspaper without seeing that stress is at an all-time high, right? Gallup has an annual negativity index, and 2021 broke records, and 2022 is on par to break even more records. A lot of it has to do with the pandemic, but we saw these trends even before the pandemic. So on many C-suites, initiatives are employee well-being, right? Because the results of that is great turnover, great reshuffle, all that other stuff, right? We've seen a lot of shifts. And what we're finding is that it's such a big deal, right? The stress and kind of understanding the environment and the responsibility of the company, that it also aligns now with ESG, which is environmental, social, and government initiatives within many corporations. So with our innovation, we're actually now talking about it from a strategic level because of its importance and impact on the organization.
Wow. We are definitely going to have you come back, because this is a topic that is important. We all have to work. We all have to work together, and making that process smoother, less stressful is really key. It's really key. And it's also, I think these skills that you talk about not only applies to the workplace, it can also be applied to your personal life, your interactions with your children, your interactions with your significant other. Because once you learn these habits and these techniques that you talk about, then you are able to, they kind of get part of your DNA.
That's right.
And you apply it in all of your life, interactions. Wow.
You're so right. Yeah, Susan Scott also recently wrote a book called Fierce Love, where she takes, to your point, Ida, these same principles and how you utilize them in a loving relationship. Because at the end of the day, the conversation is the relationship, right?
Yes.
They're very profound. And those techniques have been shown to help people in their personal lives. If you wouldn't mind, Ida, I would love to share with you one more thing before we start. So, I'm 45 years old, Ida, and I grew up in San Jose, California, pretty progressive area. And when I grew up, it was get up and don't feel sorry for yourself, right? I'm sure you can kind of relate to that saying.
Yes.
When I started my career, many senior managers were never let them see you sweat, which I'm sure you've heard as well.
Yes.
We never talked about well-being. We never talked about stress. We never talked about mental health. It wasn't a thing, right? And and now it is. So the word that we hear a lot that we hear a lot now in our nomenclature is resilience, right? And I got to tell you, I struggled with this word because I didn't know what it meant. Right? I could see the definition, and I go to my chief behavioral science officer, who he's just brilliant PhD. And I said, Gabe, what is resilience? He goes, well, Ed, it's like a marshmallow and you like bounce back into form. I'm like, okay, I'm a marshmallow, Gabe. But I still don't know what this resilience word means. I don't know what it means. I'm sorry, I don't get it. And it's interesting because HBR did a survey, Ida, where they asked, what is it in the workplace that requires you to be resilient? And I'm happy to share the data with you after our call. But the number one interaction that people face in the workplace that requires them to be resilient or increases stress is dealing with politics or difficult people in the workplace. So for me, that's tangible. Like that I get, right?
Right.
The beautiful thing about that is that we also have skills to provide people for how to combat that. So my point is that we have these big words that we use right now called resilience and stress, but there's tools underneath it to combat those if you get surgical on what it is that you're facing.
Wow, that's deep. That is really, really deep. And, we're going to definitely have you come back, because I think my whole thing is people need to hear this. They need to hear things more than one time in order to, really get it. You know what I'm saying? And then I like to dig deep into some things that you talked about as well. And wow. Edward, it's always a pleasure. You already know we had a blast the last time we connected.
I have an idea. Let me know if you think this is an idea. Let's get you on the Pulse experience, and then we can come back and you can talk about it.
Ah, wow. That definitely, because then I'm a user.
Yeah,
I'm actually experiencing it, and I'm actually okay. That's a bet.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Absolutely. Wow, Edward. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have been collaborating with Edward Beltran, leader of Ed Fierce. And I like that, fierce. That means we're gonna get this. We're gonna do this,
Right. Exactly.
So I like that. And it has been amazing to talk about it, and with the onset of like mental health and that kind of thing, and getting people to understand that dealing with your mental health and keeping your stress down is critical to your health, period. So this is definitely an important topic. And if you have questions or you want to know more, definitely reach out to Edward. And again, Edward, if you could tell everybody how to connect with you, so that way we can make sure they have that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ida. And again, thank you for having me on your show. Please, you can find us on the website, fierceinc.com. We're on all social channels as well. Again, Fierce Inc., Fierce Conversations, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I haven't gotten your invite from LinkedIn yet. I'm offended.
Oh, okay. I'll make sure I do it after we're done here. Yes, because I definitely need to be connected with you.
All right, and let's get you through the Pulse experience, and let's jump back on and let's talk about it.
Absolutely. So thank you again, and blessings and all that good stuff, and blessings to our audience, and thank you all for tuning in.